Je anilo premadano karma kacho.
Kache Purana Purashasvanabhya
Kache Purana Purashasvanabhya
Adnan Vidyeha Kilavatana
Atman Vidyeha Kilavatana
Ashata Urvya Kushalam Vidaya
Asada Urvya Kushalam Vidaya
Takshana Kushalam Swargehe
Krishna Consciousness
Kache Purana Purashasvanabhya
Kache Purana Purashasvanabhya
Padma Vidyeha Kilavatana
Atman Vidyeha Kilavatana
Asata Urvya Kushalam Vidaya
Asada Urvya Kushalam Vidaya
Takshana Kushalam Swargehe
Weather, Purana, the original, Purusha, personalities of Godhead Krishna and Balaram, Svanabhya, Brahma, Atma Anuvidya, by the request of the one who is born from the lotus. Iha, here, Kiva, certainly, Avatirno, incarnated, Asate, are, Urabhyaha, in the world, Kushalam, well-being, Vidhaya, for doing so, Kritashano, elevators of everyone's prosperity. Kushalam, all well. Shurabhyehe, in the house of Shura Singh. Translation, please tell me whether the original personality of Godhead, who incarnated themselves as the request of Brahma, who was born out of the lotus flower from the Lord, and who have increased the prosperity of the world by elevating everyone, are doing well in the house of Shura Singh. Purple. Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram are two different personalities of Godhead. God is one without a second. He expands himself in many forms without their being separate from one another. They are all plenary expansions. The immediate expansion of Lord Krishna is Baladeva, and Brahma, born from the lotus flower of Garvadaksha Vishnu, is an expansion of Baladeva. This indicates that Krishna and Baladeva are not subjected to the regulations of the universe. On the contrary, the whole universe is under their subjugation. They appeared at the request of Brahma to liberate the burden of the world, and they relieved the world by many superhuman activities so that everyone became happy and prosperous. Without the grace of the Lord, no one can become happy and prosperous, because the happiness of the family of the Lord's devotees depends on the happiness of the Lord. Vidura first of all inquired about the well-being of the Lord. Krishna and Balaram, when we say Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, we're chanting Krishna and Balaram names. Krishna and Balaram, the worshipable lords would dance and play in the sands of Raman Reti. In Vrindavan, there is a place just by the Jamuna River where Krishna and his brother Balaram, once they reached the age of childhood, beyond their babyhood, their parents moved them there. And so they used to go out with their cows and calves, just as you see in this painting. And this is Raman Reti. Srila Prabhupada wanted very much to establish a temple of Krishna in Vrindavan. And one wealthy gentleman donated land in this vicinity. So immediately Srila Prabhupada could understand that this is Raman Reti. This is where Krishna and Balaram, Krishna and his brother used to play. Why used to play? By our vision, they used to play. But actually, God always plays. Because God is not restricted by considerations of time. It is described that the spiritual world differs from the material world in the fact that there is no time. Here we are all burdened by time. Some of us are younger than others, so we don't feel it. But as the time elapses, we feel the pulling of time. Inescapable, all-devouring. But in the spiritual world, time stands still. It is called eternal time. So the activities of the Lord are called eternal, nitya. They are without time. And they go on and on and on. The example is given that just like now it is 8 o'clock here. What time is it in Phoenix, Arizona? Is it? 2 hours? 7. You are a fool. Even though you are a big computer genius and other things, and a PhD candidate, you don't even know the time in Phoenix, Arizona. Daylight savings time affects all of the United States, President. Yes, President. Dallas is not the center of the universe. So it is 7 o'clock there. And what time is it in Los Angeles? 6 o'clock. Right? So in 1 hour from now it will be 8 o'clock in Phoenix. And in 2 hours from now it will be 8 o'clock in Los Angeles. And somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, 3 hours from now, it will be 8 o'clock, and so on and so forth. In other words, somewhere on this planet, it is always 8 o'clock. Not only is it always 8 o'clock, somewhere on this planet, it is always 7 o'clock. Just like an hour ago, it was 7 o'clock here, and it's somewhere 6 o'clock everywhere. So every moment of time is constantly present somewhere. And this example was given to help us to fathom the activities of Krishna. Somewhere Krishna is now being born in some universe. Somewhere in some universe Krishna is lifting Govardhan Hill. Somewhere Krishna is dancing with the gopis. Every one of these activities is called nitya, eternal. Nitya lila, eternal play. Because God doesn't have to go to work. like we do. We work as part of our karma. We work off karma. We toil. Human beings have to toil. The Christian explanation in their early creation story, Adam and Eve didn't have to toil. But then they made one fatal mistake. What did they do? Part job. They took the forbidden fruit. They tasted the fruit from the tree of knowledge. Isn't it? Now what does this mean? Are we supposed to remain in ignorance? Have you ever thought about this? Now that tree of knowledge, generally we would encourage people to become knowledgeable. But what was that tree of knowledge? It was a tree of the knowledge of duality of material life. There is knowledge of spiritual life, but it is free of duality. Here, everything has its opposites. There is always bad with the good. There is always age with youth. There is always suffering along with happiness. When we are young, like a child, doesn't want to ever be happy, unhappy. A child cannot accept the fact that there is an equal proportion of misery and happiness. A child has a sense and wants to always be happy. So that childlike sense is because they have not yet tasted from the tree of the fruit of knowledge. They're apparently innocent. Not totally, but so much more so than we are. So sometimes people regress to being childlike again. Right? They would prefer, I wish I could crawl back into my mother's womb and not have to face the world. Just like we see the story of Sukadeva Goswami. How long did he remain in his mother's womb? 16 years. Must have been very uncomfortable for his mother. It's hard to imagine a 16-year-old, but we'll have to say that he kept himself small. And you have to be a little creative in these explanations, because if he was full-grown 16-year-old, that would be a pretty grotesque situation. So he kept himself like a baby, like a 9-month-old. This should be our explanation. And then, when he came out, he immediately, the age came upon him and he was fully grown. Something of that sort should be put. So he also didn't want to come out, because he said, I'm not going to come out into this world and have to get a job in Dallas, Texas. It's going to get hot there. It's probably a hot time of the year. It's not even the right time of the year to come out. I'm going to stay here. And so his father soothed him, cooled him down by teaching him the pastimes of Krishna. And this, after all, is the way to keep cool, to repeatedly hear Krishna's pastimes. Shangatama Sukatama Krishna, Punyashavana Kirtana, Hridiyantashtaviya Bhadrati Vikanam Isuritsitam. The pastimes of Krishna, they purify the heart of all that is unclean. So one of the things that we have to do on a daily basis is to hear Krishna's pastimes. The chanting of our Hare Krishna mantra, the chanting that we do on the chanting beads, is meant to remind us of Krishna's pastimes. It is explained by Bhaktivedanta Goswami. And when the chanting becomes very nicely done, then the pastimes will become fixed up in such a way that as you chant the names, the pastimes will appear within the mind, just like you're watching a movie picture. It would be so satisfying. So we have to come to that stage of offenseless chanting, pure chanting, Shuddhanam. These two brothers, Balaram and Krishna, Krishna here is God and Balaram is his older brother, so that's an interesting relationship. God is the creator, God is the origin, but he has an older brother. Isn't that interesting? That means he's not only got an older brother, he's got a father and a mother. The mother of God, the father of God, he's got a grandfather, grandmother. He has a whole entourage, which has to mean something to us. We have to understand this. That if God is the origin of everything, and yet he has a father and mother, it must mean that there is no origin to God, and that his father and mother relationships with him are eternal. Because if they began at a certain point, it means whoever is God's father is actually God. We have to understand that. If God is he from whom everything comes, the mover who moves everything but is himself not moved, then he can't have a father. But Krishna has a father. He has a father and a mother, and an older brother, and a grandfather, and a grandmother. And so many elderly persons are in Vrindavan, which means there was never a time when they were not there. That is eternal life. And that is the life that we are aiming to join. One day we shall be taken into that eternal entourage of Krishna. Prabhupada wrote one letter to me. I pray that in this very lifetime, you shall become fully Krishna conscious and enter into Krishna's pastimes. So this is the prayer. The spiritual master prays for the disciple that you should one day be able to enter into Krishna's pastimes. But how to become qualified to do so requires so much training. Right? What is the most fundamental, basic element of that training? It is faith. Shraddha, faith. Faith is such a delicate ingredient. It's so hard to develop faith as time goes on. But without faith, there cannot be prema bhakti, love of God. Love of God begins in the form of a seed, and the seed is faith. When it says that the spiritual master plants the seed of bhakti within the heart, what does it mean? What is it that the spiritual master is planting? Can anyone say? Is by the association of the spiritual master, faith becomes awakened. There is already love for Krishna. There is already love for God inside the heart. It's there, but it's dormant, like a seed which is not doing anything. So in association with the spiritual master, that seed wakes up. It begins to show life. It fructifies. And that's the beginning of faith. Adao Shraddha. Adao means in the beginning. Adao Shraddha. Ata Sadhu. Then from that faith, instilled, inspired by the Guru, one searches after Tata Sadhu. One looks for saintly persons. Who are saintly persons? Those persons that can make the flame or the Shraddha, the faith, increase. And who are we supposed to avoid? Avoid those persons who make the faith diminish. We have to avoid their association. Because to get their association is like trying to light a fire while someone is pouring water on it. Just mechanically, they have to know. You're not going to help me. You can't help me. So we have to avoid that association. Then bhajana kriya. By associating with the Vaishnavas who are faithful to your guru, you become inspired to do bhajan, to worship Krishna. Kriya means to purify through worshiping processes. Kriya yoga, bhajana kriya, anartha nivrittisha. Then what happens? The unwanted things come out of the heart. What is unwanted that is in the heart? Desires for so many things other than Krishna. That means that the root of those desires is lust. Lust, in a generic sense, means the enjoying tendency. And the opposite of lust is love. What does love mean? The serving principle. To serve. Generally, our service is connected with repayment. You don't go to work unless you're paid for it. That's not love. But here we are doing so many things that we don't get paid for. You're sitting and listening. I'm speaking. The deities have been worshipped. On and on, we can add up all of the things that we do here, which have nothing to do with the principle of payment, lust. They are activities of love, bhakti. Bhakti means to do service to Krishna without any thought of return. So, when one does this, all satisfaction comes. You begin to experience a pleasure which you previously thought would come by acquisition of things you wanted and needed. Now come by giving. What you thought would happen by taking, you now find happens when you give. Lust becomes replaced by love. That's bhakti. That is enough. And the result of that is that one becomes fixed, nishtha. The faith now becomes strong. Now you become convinced, this is the principle. I have experienced it myself. This is nishtha. And when you continue on with that mood of nishtha, then real taste comes, ruchi. You get the taste. The bhakti. And that taste is described to be like hot sugar candy or hot sugar cane juice. It's so sweet that you cannot resist drinking it. It is so sweet, and yet when you drink it, it burns. It burns means that you see that your whole material edifice is burning away. Your false ego, the conceptions of what you thought you were, are burning away. And you would like to hold on to them because they're all that you've known. But the taste of that sugar cane going down your throat, you don't want to stop drinking. This is ruchi. And from ruchi comes ashakti. Ashakti means attachment. Attachment of the type where you cannot be shaken, even if your life was at risk. Just like you see some Christians during the Inquisition give up this belief, they would be told. They would say, no, we can't do that. torture you, just like Haridas Thakur. Stop chanting Hare Krishna. I want to stop, but my tongue doesn't agree. That's what Haridas said. When he was told, stop chanting Hare Krishna, he said, I'm trying to tell my tongue to stop chanting. It won't stop. It keeps chanting. It has its own way. This is a Shakti. So much attachment that nothing can inhibit your practicing of Krishna consciousness. And from that comes Bhava. Bhava means the first ray from the rising sun of love of God. When the sun comes up in the early morning over the horizon and you see the first ray, it is the whole nighttime sky becomes completely illuminated. So one ray of love of God in the form of what is called Bhava, and means loving Krishna. That one ray is enough to illuminate your entire existence. And it means, it heralds the coming of the full risen sun. And that is prema, love of God. So prema, love of God, is the fulfillment of Shraddha. So now when you have this little drop of Shraddha, how carefully you have to protect it. How carefully you have to nurture it. Lest anything should happen. How carefully. And you therefore have to keep that association, sadhu sangha, and perform your bhajana kriya. Otherwise, how will you get to prema? So, these two brothers are said here that you bring prosperity to everyone. And actually, this is the case. They bring prosperity. They make the world fortunate. Krishna and Balaram make the world fortunate. In a material sense, they make the world fortunate. And certainly talking for ourselves here, in the spiritual sense, that make the world fortunate. So Vidura is inquiring about this Krishna and Balaram. He's inquiring from Uddhava, the intimate associate of Krishna. How are Krishna and Balaram doing? Just like we inquire, how is my spiritual master doing? We have to see Krishna and Balaram through our Guru. We have to see God through Guru. Even the Christians say that, don't they? Right? God comes in the form of Guru. For them, the Guru is Jesus. The Jews also used to have God coming in the form of the rabbi. Every religion has this. The shamans, shamanistic magicians, they're dispensers of the effervescence, they call it, of God.
You have a slope and step. You have a slope and step. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Deva Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Bhagavan,
Okay, translate.
Guru is Brahma, Guru is Vishnu, Guru is Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Bhagavan. After you are and Guru.
Now, since you have quoted this verse, Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, is there someone named Brahma or Maheshwara or Vishnu who is separate from Guru?
Actually, Guru Brahma means Brahma is there. Guru Vishnu, Vishnu means
So, there is still Vishnu and Guru. There is Brahma and Guru. Not that they are one. Are you agreeable? Good. Then you can say that verse. because normally the shloka that you have quoted is very popular amongst the impersonalists, the Mayavadis. And when they say that shloka, they take it in a different way. They take it that they're all one and there is no difference. So one time Prabhupada wrote me a letter because one Sanskrit pundit had come to London and he wanted to teach Sanskrit classes to the devotees. So the devotees let him sit on this seat in the asana. And he would begin the Sanskrit class by chanting Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Vishnu, as you would chant it. So we wrote Prabhupada a letter, and Prabhupada replied us, why have you let this person sit on the Vyasa-sana? Because, first of all, that chant, that mantra is very much favored by the impersonalists as a way of explaining that there is no difference between Vishnu, Shiva, Guru, or Brahma, or anything, that they're all one. There is a way, as you have correctly stated, to explain that Vishnu comes to us through Guru, Shiva comes to us through our Guru, Brahma comes to us through our Guru. But we don't take it that that means that there is no such separate person as Shiva, Brahma, and Vishnu. So he was a Mayavadi, this Sanskrit teacher. And of course, Prabhupada said to get him off the Vyasa-sana. Prabhupada accepted it. I think I've written about this in Servant of the Servant. Anybody read Servant of the Servant? Nobody read it. Yes, no. It's in that section about London. Remember? Huh? Sounds like you all better read the book again. Another question? Since we started question. Yes. How many words should I explain it? All right, well, it's related to that question. It's put in a simple way. Everything is God. Sarvam Kalpitam Brahma, and yet everything is not God, but the energy of God. We agree that everything is God, but it is God in the form of His energy. And His energy, and He is yet beyond His energy. Just like a spider spins a web. A spider spins a web from his own saliva, and then he walks on that web. And then he withdraws the web again into himself. So the web is certainly part of him. So this shows how, for example, in the Bhaktivedanta philosophy, we explain that the world is made of the energy of God. It's spun like a web out of His energy. And one day it would be withdrawn into Him. So the world is God, just as the spider's web is part of the spider. But the spider is much more than his web. Another example is fire. Fire and the flames of the fire and the wood and the smoke. They're all different aspects of the fire. And yet, you cannot get from this wood what you can get from the fire. You cannot get from the flames or smoke what you can get from the fire. But each one of them are different aspects of the fire. So similarly, the living entities are like the sparks coming out of the flame, which is Krishna. They're only individual sparks, qualitatively one with the fire, with God, but quantitatively tiny. When the sparks are within the fire, they remain fire, flame. But when the sparks come out of the fire and get separated, they can become extinguished. Similarly, when the living entities become separate from God, then they lose their godly quality and they appear to be extinguished. Now, similarly, there is different ways to explain smoke, and etc. So, Achita Vedanta simply means simultaneously everything is one with God and different from God. We are godly, but we are not God. We can never become God. We can become godly. We can become servants of God. Another question? Ladies?
We were with God at one time, but we desired other things. That's what we're in now. And until you open your heart to want to get back to Krishna, there's no hope to really ever regaining him.
Okay.
And you're the example of one who is with Krishna, even in this material energy.
I aspire to be with Krishna. And as long as I'm engaged in Krishna's service, I feel myself to be with Krishna. So I try to always be engaged in Krishna's service.
I've always seen you that way, and I'm already lucky for that.
Thank you very much. I'm trying my best. It's all the grace of my spiritual master who trained me to do this. I owe my life to him, and I simply dedicate everything to him. Whatever I am, he made me. Otherwise, I was just an ordinary person. And he entered into my life and changed me.
He must be proud of you.
Sometimes he may be. Sometimes he may not be. I try to make the balance in a favorable side.
Ladies.
This process that you described today, always be so that Prema or Uchi Baba, related Prema, it seems that the only personality by Srila Prabhupada yourself and some very special and get to that level in terms of the love of God and then in Krishna.
I don't think it's so rare, although it is said it's a durlabha there. But I think that it's not so rare. I remember a letter Prabhupada wrote to Jamuna, 1969. He said, "You're already on the level of Baba." It's not so rare, but we are not following the process strictly, so we believe it is rare. Anybody who follows this process gets taste. I see people here in the morning chanting japa, and I see some of them have some taste. I see devotees serving in this community, quite steady in their service. These are symptoms of advancement in Krishna consciousness. As far as there being some slight anarthas, there'll be anarthas even up to the point of bhakti. Anartha nivritti doesn't mean that 100% of the anarthas go. The majority go, the vast majority go, but there may be some trace. But generally, some of the devotees in this community are already very advanced. And the process is very strong. It is a very powerful process. You take a boy like Michael here, I think he's made so much advancement. So much advancement. Still an excellent spirit, but that's just his external self-body that he was born with. But actually, he chants very steadily, does his service steadily. He's made in just such a short time, made so much advancement. So, there's no reason why he can't achieve Prabhupada. He has to be patient. He gets proud because I said to say that. I'll tell him actually, I was only saying that to encourage you. Not only possible, it's going on. I think you see, we don't recognize how advanced devotees are until the final test. And then we see it when devotees get ready to leave their body and they're equipoised and they're surrounded by kirtan and they're in the whole dham and they're chanting. Then you see how advanced and powerful they are. Just like Neelamata when she gave birth to her child, she was chanting her japa. How many mothers can do that? And she never missed chanting her rounds. I get so many letters from my disciples who have become mothers and they tell me how they can't chant their rounds. And I just tell them about Neelamata. I said, well, she chants her rounds. You can't tell me you can't chant your rounds because you're not a newborn baby. Because she chants her rounds. So anyone that's this strong, we can understand that when it comes time for them to leave their body, they have no difficulty remembering Krishna, and Krishna will take them back into his pastime. We misjudge the advancement, the level of advancement of devotees. Devotees are very powerful. This process is very, very powerful. We really don't recognize how powerful. If we don't fully take up the process, that is another matter. Then we think it is so hard, it's so distant, the goal is so distant. But otherwise, this process works. This process was given, by Lord Chaitanya. It was given by the disciplic line of succession, just for the people of this age. It's meant to be done in one lifetime. It doesn't have to be done in one more lifetime. Very powerful process. So I think with those encouraging words, I will stop. Prabhupada ki
Good evening.